Hello, sixth graders. And in this video today, we're going to go through our next section of class notes for our unit of Earth's changing surface. Before we begin, you might right away recognize the different background. I am actually down in the basement of my house, which is the playroom for Owen. So I know sometimes you guys are curious. So let me just kind of give you the quick tour here. All of his toys. Look, you got to protect the fireplace, right? The gate to keep him out. All his toys and stuff, and his bookshelf there with all his books. And then this kid loves laundry. So he's down here. Hey, Owie. You say hi to everybody? He's got his old clothes that we put like in little baskets, and then he just pulls them all out and throws them and plays with them and puts them back into all of the in the baskets. So it's kind of funny. So yeah, that's where we're doing this video from today, down here in the basement. So let's go ahead and get started here though, so that we can work through everything that we need to here for today and then move past this unit as we get into winter break. So let me change this here a little bit. Those lights aren't as bright. There we go. Okay. So first thing I want you to notice is I'm on the document side and I'm at the section where you're going to start today. We're actually going to skip number 3. Number 3 is wind. We're going to try to get it done in class, and if we don't get to class, that's okay. We're just going to skip it. It's just about wind erosion, and for the most part, you understand water erosion. You will understand wind erosion. It's pretty much the same in terms of the factors for the most part, as long as you know that it's the wind is what's carrying instead of the water doing the erosion. Okay, so we're going to jump down to number 4 here and number 5. And talk all about glaciers today. Glaciers are probably something that you might not have as much familiar with. You might not be as familiar with, because there's not maybe as much experience with it. So let's go through, talk about glaciers today a little bit, and move in and take our notes as we go through this. All right, here we go. All right, so what is a glacier? Well, glaciers technically are moving. Okay, so they're slow-moving rivers of ice. Now, if you're sitting there standing next to a glacier, it's going to be very difficult for you to tell that it's actually moving. But if you would stay there for, 2 weeks, you would notice that it is changing location, right? Its position is changing. Or if you marked the spot, left, came back in a month and checked to see where that mark was, you would notice that the glacier is now into a different spot. And it's either moving forward or retreating, moving backwards. So how do they form? So glaciers formed when there's lots of snowfall. And in fact, it has to be this specific ratio where the snowfall is greater than melt for a long period of time. So in other words, we could have a really bad snow here in Cleveland, like we did just a couple weeks ago, but it starts to melt, right? And then so that snow is not going to really build on top of each other. But let's say that we were in an area where it was going to stay cold for a long time, long time, like all year long. Then that snow is going to stay. And every time it snows, it's going to snow more on top of that. And then more on top of that, more on top of that. And there's not enough melting to go on to actually get rid of the snow. The snow just kind of keeps building. And because it keeps building, there's this weight and pressure from all of these layers of snow that are pushing down on that snow at the bottom, and it literally turns the snow into ice. It's compacting it. And that's how the glacier forms. Now, as the glaciers move, they literally, because it's this hard ice, think of it almost like a shovel. It is scraping against the land as it slowly moves. And because it's like this shovel made of ice, it's going to break up the rock and the soil. So it's going to do the weathering and erosion kind of all at once with this glacier. Now, why are they important for us in this unit, and why are we spending more time on it here this year than you probably ever have? And it's because of where we are located and the effect that glaciers have had on our natural resources here in the Cleveland area, and that has to do with the Great Lakes. So the Great Lakes were formed because of glaciers. And so we have this unbelievable natural resource of the Lake Erie right to the north of us that provides us with all kinds of clean water, areas to be able to have recreation, shipping in terms of ports and things for different types of boats and barges to bring materials in and out of Cleveland. So it's really one of the main reasons why Cleveland was really even settled as a city is because of Lake Erie. Slide over here. Okay. So what's happening as these glaciers are moving? They're literally pushing this rock and soil downhill, kind of like a giant bulldozer would do, if you've ever seen a bulldozer. Another thing that is a model or a good example, but much, much smaller scale than even a bulldozer, is if you have ever shoveled snow. If you take a snow shovel and you push it, you're going to get snow that collects right into that shovel, and that shovel would represent the glacier. But then along the sides, if there's too much snow, you're going to get these little trails of snow as it kind of falls off of the glacier. And then if you stop moving your shovel before you pick it up and throw it onto the grass or whatever, you have like a pile of that snow right there. And that's kind of what a glacier is doing. And in fact, what's a little bit difficult about glaciers is they have all of these really unique terms for all of those different piles of sediment. In fact, glaciers even have their own name for sediment. They just don't call it sediment. It has a special name, and we're going to get to that in the next slide. The big effect, though, of glaciers with this weathering and erosion is, like the picture below me here, is that it creates like a U-shaped valley. So rivers usually create a V-shaped valley. Glaciers create more of it's more rounded, more of a U-shaped valley. That's usually the signature of big glacier movement. Okay, if you need to pause the video before I move on to the next slide. Make sure you're caught up, and we're going to move on to the next slide. All right, so deposition from glaciers can occur in a couple of different ways. One of them is just melting, right? When glaciers begin to melt, they're depositing all of the material that they had been scraping and carrying along with it as they were moving, okay? Now, here's where it gets kind of confusing because, like I said, glaciers have their own terms for all of their different sediment, and depending on how it's deposited and where it's deposited, it gives them different names. But it's all just the sediment of what it's carrying along. Okay, so we're going to go through a bunch of these. Obviously, we're not having a test in this unit, so it's not like you need to memorize these, but I do want you to at least be exposed to them so that you can see what they're called. So till is the first one, and till is just sediment deposited by glaciers. It's kind of like the overall term that we use for any of the sediment that's left behind by a glacier. We just call it till. Most of Ohio's soil is considered till from the glaciers that form the Great Lakes, and is one of the reasons that we have good farmland in Ohio is because of this till and the different type of sediment that it carried with it to make it a pretty nutrient-rich soil. Okay, a moraine then is if you have a pile of this sediment of till at the front and the sides. Okay? Go back to my example with the snow shovel. And I was talking about like if you just pushed your snow shovel along the sidewalk and then you stopped it before you scooped it up and threw it to the side. As you went along, you might have like this little bit of snow that's falling off the sides of it. That would be moraine. And then if I stopped the shovel before I lift it off, the pile of snow right there, that would also be moraine. And they have different names for those as well. Like over here, it's kind of hard. Might be a little bit hard to see, but you have end moraine, which would be like up like at the front of the shovel like I was describing. Okay? And then the lateral moraine is the stuff that would be there on the side. This moraine created the edges around Lake Erie, so here in Ohio and up into New York and in the other side on Canada. Okay, outwash. Outwash is then when the glacier begins to melt. It is literally this melting water, and it can create rivers and lakes, and you guessed it, it created the Great Lakes. Okay, another big effect of the glaciers in the Great Lakes region was that it also then created this outwash for the Mississippi River. All right, pause the video if you need to. We got one more slide here to get through. All right, so what are some of the other effects that glaciers have? Like we just mentioned the Great Lakes, but that's a pretty dramatic effect, and that's not always what happens when glaciers are around. There's lots of other things too. And so you're going to see a lot of these here in the picture as I talk about them. Moraine we already talked about, but think about it. If you have like these hills of sediment, well, we're talking about a ginormous glacier that is moving through the area. A hill isn't going to be like some little hill that you just like maybe like ride your bike up and down. You're talking like pretty big effects and landforms that can be created by these glaciers because the glaciers themselves are pretty big. So we already talked about the end moraine. So this would be this hill of eroded debris, and it's at the furthest end of the glacier. Okay, so we see that here. Okay, then you can get these other things called drumlin hills. These drumlin hills are also hills, but they're much more narrow than the end moraine hills. And they're usually in a field. Like there's usually a bunch of them kind of close together. So up here, you can kind of see this drumlin field here. So those are also hills, also by deposited till. And remember, till is the sediment. Kettle lakes. So you might get an area where it digs out a little bit deeper, and that could be because of the glacier itself, or it might be because of the land. Maybe the land and the soil there already was a little bit softer, so more of it got taken away. Well, obviously, as it goes through that and ice is left behind, if that ice melts, it's going to create this little lake. And so those are called kettle lakes. Lots of the lakes up in Minnesota are kettle lakes. So Minnesota is known as the land of 1,000 lakes. The reason they have so many lakes are because of glaciers. Okay, esker also has to do with the melting part, and this is more of a stream. So it's water that is coming from the outwash. So as the glacier is melting and you have this outwash, these little streams that are created, they call them eskers. And so you see like a little one here. And then you can get a flat area called the outwash plain, and this is where the glacial stream has deposited, and it's usually past the end moraine. So here's our end moraine again. And so this whole area here is the outwash plain, where it's been nice and flattened out by the scraping glacier as it's moved across. Okay, and the last thing are these really tiny little hills called caves. And these are like, they're usually of sand and gravel. They're not really of earth. They're not really of dirt and soil, so they wouldn't necessarily look like a regular hill. They would be more of a pile of sand and gravel. So some of the larger sediment, because the dirt is going to be a lot smaller. The sediment size is going to be a lot smaller. So smaller sediment than the dirt. Those are the caves. Okay. Here are the Great Lakes, like we talked about. So here is Lake Erie down here. So Cleveland is like right in here, down here at the bottom. Okay. Huge, massive lakes that are tremendous natural resources for all of the surrounding areas. Oh, I think Owen just knocked my cup over. Oh boy, and he's making noise. Okay, evidence of glaciers. On Kelly's Island, which is an island that you'd have to take a boat to off of Sandusky, which is about 2 hours west of Cleveland, like where Cedar Point is. You can take these ferry rides and you go out to an island called Kelly's Island, and they have this really cool, unique spot where they show glacier grooves, okay, along here. And those glacier grooves, that's just regular rock, that these grooves literally have been cut out because of the glaciers. Okay, and so they have done the glacier movement through those. You see those, Owen? You see those glacier grooves in there? Oh, yeah? Okay. Did you guys see his shirt, by the way? Yeah, he's wearing his NASA shirt. But there's a little bit bigger close-up of it. They used to, at Kelly's Island, they used to let you walk on these. Somebody must have fallen and gotten hurt or something, because now they have these fences up there. They don't let you do it, but they used to let you actually walk on these glacier grooves and things. But those were formed. That was just regular rock that's been carved out by the glacier. And so that's always evidence of glacier movement is that you have these glacier grooves. Okay, that's where we're going to stop today. Make sure that if you need any part of this document, you go back on the video so that you're not missing anything. And then, like I said, hopefully we'll get to wind in class as we're kind of moving through this unit really quickly. Thanks, guys. Hope you have a good day, and I will see you next time in class.